Welcome to this week's edition of Mob Talk. I'm Dave Stratweiser.
And I'm George Anastasia with the Philadelphia Inquirer.
George, a little double dip this week, interesting historical note when it comes to prosecuting the mob here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, 24 years ago this week, 2 indictments, the beginning of the end of Nicky Scarfo's reign as mob boss.
Okay, George, old school history lesson here. First week of April 1987, Nicky Scarfo takes 2 hits.
Yeah, he's already in jail. He was arrested for the attempt to extort Willard Rouse in the Penn's Landing operation. And, you know, we're waiting. Back then, much like now, you're waiting for when the other shoe's going to drop. They dropped an indictment in New Jersey and an indictment here in Philadelphia.
All right, walk me through the New Jersey indictment. Involved 2 murders. Yeah,
there was the murder of the judge, Eddie Helfand, which was one of the most notorious hits in the dawn of casino gambling in Atlantic City. He was at the Flamingo Lounge. A guy walked in with a snow shovel, blew him away. That was the key in that particular case against Scarfo. And then we had the indictment here in Philadelphia where Salvatore Testa, another infamous hit, was part of that indictment brought by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office.
Salvie Testa lured to a candy store, I believe.
On Passyunk Avenue, yeah. Right? Candy store on Passyunk Avenue. Went there supposedly to settle some kind of gambling debt, a dispute between 2 wise guys. And the allegation was that Wayne Grandy walked up behind him and popped him in the back of the head. That was the end of... They had been stalking Salvie for almost a year, and there was a lot of internal friction within the organization. And the murder of Salvie Testa kind of set the tone for the Scarfo era, and a lot of guys in the organization said, if he could kill Salvie after all Salvie did for him, he'll kill anybody. And that, I think that's one of the reasons guys started to flip.
One of those attempted hits on Testa was a drive-by shooting with a shotgun. He was standing on the street somewhere, and a car rolls up, out comes the barrel of a shotgun, and bam.
Yeah, he was in the 9th Street Italian Market. That was during the Riccobini-Scarfo War, right. And Testa was leading the charge for the Scarfo people, and a couple of the Riccobini soldiers walked by and almost blew his arm off. He survived that hit, and that's one of the things that people said. Salvie put his life on the line for Scarfo, and now Scarfo has him killed, and that kind of undermined Scarfo as a mob boss.
Didn't they call Salvie the Prince?
He was the Prince. I mean, and you know, that's another thing. If you got to remember back then, I mean, Scarfo was, a lot of people would say, psychotic. Scarfo was paranoid. Salvie Testa was featured in an article in the Wall Street Journal,
right,
calling the mob prince of Philadelphia. And, you know, his bloodlines, his father was Chicken Man Testa, had been the boss. And you know, this was a guy raised in Cosa Nostra, and he was a fierce, charismatic guy. And I think Scarfo was jealous, paranoid, and for a lot of different reasons decided he had to go.
I just wanted to let you know, I don't just read the Inquirer and the Daily News, I do read the Wall Street Journal.
There you go.
So, Testa and the Helfand murder, 2 kind of dueling news conferences in the same week. Yeah. Talk to me about that. Yeah.
Well, you know, everybody wanted a piece of what was going on. And again, I said, it's a lot like right now. We're waiting. New Jersey had that Helfand murder, which was
big
notorious.
Big news conference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a roundup. And then here, the Testa murder was one that wanted to be, you know, the DA wanted a piece of the Scarfo investigation, and they took the Testa murder. Ultimately, both of those murders ended up in the racketeering case.
Right.
And if you look at what happened with Testa, the Testa murder, the DA brought that case to trial and they lost.
Right.
And the Philadelphia DA's office has an abysmal record prosecuting mob cases. They lost that one. The John McCullough murder and the Frankie Flowers murder were both convictions overturned on appeal. Right. And then there was the Stevie Boris murder where they, in essence, arrested the wrong guy, Neil Ferber, and he was on death row. And that was another black eye. So the DA's office has had a lousy record in terms of prosecuting mob hits. And it makes more sense to let the feds do it, and ultimately that's what happened. The Testa murder ended up back in the racketeering case. New Jersey backed away eventually, didn't prosecute the Helfand murder. They gave it to the feds, and that was part of the indictment and the prosecution that has Scarfo in jail right now.
Let's talk a little bit about this whole situation with 2 shots at Nicky Scarfo. We saw that happen. Now, fast forward, if you will, 24 years ahead, and we have a lot of these Scarfo guys coming out of jail right now.
A lot of the guys who were indicted and convicted in that case are back out or about to come out. I think the only guys we're never going to see is Nicky. Nicky doesn't get out till 2033. He'll be over 100 years old by the time that happens. Those guys are coming back into South Philadelphia, where, as I said, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, not unlike 24 years ago. The question is, where do they fit in if the power vacuum is created by the indictment of Joe Legambi and those guys?
Still in jail, Chucky Merlino, Joey Merlino's dad.
Right.
Correct. Joseph Cianglini, the father of mob captain John Cianglini. Correct.
Right. Nicky Iannarelli and Nicky. Those are the guys, and most of the other guys are either out or about to come out in that case.
All right. Do they get status? We talked about this once before, and are they interested in this at all? You think at this point they've been in jail a long, long time?
I think they're entitled to status in terms of the underworld if they want it. The question is, did they wise up? Did they decide, I don't want to go back there? Some of these guys are getting up in age now. I mean, do you want to go back out? Long John Mortorano was a guy who came out and wanted to get back in. He ended up dead. So, you know, there's not a big upside in all of this. I don't know. At that age, if it makes any sense to say, I'm a wise guy, I went back into the family. We'll see.
Was that double indictment that week? Was that a decimating blow to the Scarfo family?
I think it was the beginning of the end. We knew that all of this stuff was building, and we saw it coming. And then it started to come out, bing, bing, bing. I mean, there was also a drug case. Scarfo beat that case, but there was a drug case in the midst of all of that as well. And what you had were Nick Caramandi flipped, Tommy Del Giorno flipped. There was a lot of good evidence developed by a lot of different agencies, and it all came together in probably the most significant racketeering case in the history of the Philadelphia mob.
All right, George, we'll wrap this up with current mob boss Joe Legambi. Has a little bit of history in that era. Tell us about that.
Yeah, he was one of the shooters, alleged shooters in the Frankie D'Alfonso murder, which was one of the cases the DA won and then lost on appeal. And because of that, Legambi is back out on the street. But he was, according to the feds, a shooter back in that era, very familiar with what was going on. And now the question is history going to repeat itself? Is he going to be back at the defense table in a racketeering case?
All right, we'll have to wait and see. We keep hearing about it, but we don't see it. When are they going to pull the trigger? See you next week on Mob Talk.